This is Luke Humphries, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to what is going to be episode number 8 of The Bounce Out, brought to you proudly by the Josh's Dartistry podcast. The Bounce Out is a slightly shortened version of our podcast that we do just to bring you up to date with all the latest news and goings on in the world of darts. Slightly shorter episode than a regular Josh's Dartistry podcast, but nonetheless, I've got the team with me. They are here, primed and ready on the Zoom, ready to chat all things darts. Introducing to you first, the man, the myth, the legend. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Josh Gorton. How are you, Josh?
I'm very well, thank you, John. How are you, mate?
I'm good. So, yeah, Josh, you messaged me sort of 48 hours ago saying, are we all free to get round a table, just so we could do a little bounce out for everybody?
Yeah, it's been about 3 weeks or so since we last recorded, and there's been plenty going on. We've had 2 different Super Series and the UK Open, so there's plenty to catch up on, John. Excellent.
Let's introduce you to the second member of the team, Statsman himself, Mr. Neil Connor. Good evening, Neil.
Good evening, John. How are you?
I'm all good. I'm needing a haircut, I must admit. I'm looking forward to a trim. Hopefully we can get some barbershops back open soon.
Well, you get the missus to do it, don't you? Because I've seen you streaming it.
Yeah, Kate, God bless her. She has done me a few lockdown haircuts, but I think she's probably fed up with it now, and I'm sure my normal hairdresser will be glad of the business. So hopefully they'll be reopening soon, and we can all go and get a haircut. What else are we looking forward to, Neil? Obviously, things are starting to ease off by the 29th of March, and we can get back to doing a few more normal things. What's the first thing you're going to do, Neil, when you're allowed out of the house a little bit longer?
I suspect one of the first things I do different to what I'm doing now is have a game of tennis.
Oh, hello. With your regular tennis partner, Mr. Josh Gorton.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to beating him when the courts reopen next week. But I suspect that will be the main difference. I'm a very simple guy.
I've always said that.
I get my coffees from Costa. I can watch the football on the telly. So as long as the tennis reopens, and we can eventually get back to football stadiums, I'll be happy.
Well, you guys haven't played tennis in so long, Neil. I reckon the standard will be pretty funny. I might come down and watch that. I reckon it'll be quite comical.
The problem is the bar was always quite low, so I'm not actually sure how it can get much lower, to be honest.
All right, well, I tell you what, I might come down and live stream that. Actually, I'm sure why do you
have to say that, Neil?
I reckon the JDP fans would love to watch you two knocking the tennis ball around.
Pay-per-view, I think.
$9.99 on BT Sport.
Pain per view, maybe.
Let's move it on. We're here to talk about darts. We've got an agenda. Josh has been well organised and sent an agenda over. And Josh, probably 2 of the biggest things we're going to be talking about, as you mentioned right at the top. We've had 2 of the Super Series now, and of course the UK Open in Milton Keynes, haven't we? Plenty of darts action recently.
Yeah, lots of different tournaments and lots of different winners as well. From the 9 tournaments, there's been 8 different winners, loads of 9 darters, ridiculous standard, and we've also got the Premier League to look forward to in a couple of weeks' time.
Excellent stuff. Josh, just touching on the UK Open, obviously, I'm sure most of the listeners will know by now, Luke Humphries managed to reach his first major final, and you managed to catch up with Luke, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I caught up with Luke just before the second Super Series, reflecting on his UK Open exploits and looking ahead for the rest of 2021. Luke also had a really positive Super Series too, which we're going to talk about later on. So he's in a good moment at the moment, Luke Humphries.
Good. We look forward to hearing from Luke. Josh, we are hurtling towards the end of March, and after March obviously comes April, and with the beginning of April comes the beginning of the Premier League season. Josh, we're going to have a chat about that this evening as well, aren't we?
Indeed, yeah. We had confirmation as well from the PDC that the second half is going to take place in May, so it's going to be quite a shortened Premier League, quite an intensive Premier League this year. So We know all the 10 participants. We now know the fixtures for the first 9 weeks. So, yeah, plenty to discuss about that.
And Neil, although we're doing a shortened version of our podcast this evening, I think you'll be able to bring us some updated Premier League odds this evening, yeah?
Yeah, as we start to get nearer to the event, it'll be interesting to see if there's been any movement over recent weeks.
Good. Look forward to that. We've also got some other talking points that we'll discuss as and when they crop up towards the end of the show. And Josh has been asking for your questions for the panel on social media, and we've had a few questions come in as well. So we'll endeavour to answer those. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for joining us. This is the Josh's Dartistry podcast. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at Josh's Dartistry. Check out Josh's website www.joshisdartistry.com. You can also follow the Facebook page over on Facebook. Do a little search for Josh's Dartistry. You'll find it. Thanks for checking out and downloading the podcast. The podcast is available from all your excellent and good podcast providers. So if you know anyone who's into the darts and would benefit from a darting podcast, then please do spread the word. Leave us a little review as well on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars, of course. That always helps us out on the charts over on Apple iTunes podcast. And thanks for downloading us and enjoy the show. You're listening to the Josh's Dartistry podcast. Don't forget you can check us out on Facebook, the Josh's Dartistry page. You can also follow us on Twitter at Josh's Dartistry. And you can also go to our website, www.joshisdartistry.com, for all the latest news, blogs and information on the world of darts. Don't forget you can also call us and leave us a message on our voicemail box. That's 07739 738 329. That's 07739 738 329. Call our voicemail box, leave us a message, leave us a question, and we may play it on the show. Now back to the show.
This is Nathan Aspinall, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Right then, Josh, kick us off. Super Series 1, right at the end of February, coming from Bolton. Tell us what happened.
Indeed. Well, yeah, you mentioned Bolton, the former home of the UK Open, so it was a bit of a trip down memory lane for a lot of the players. First 4 Players' Championship events taking place, and we had 4 different winners as well. Joe Cullen, who had a really good, strong end to 2020, kicked off with a victory over Johnny Clayton in the first Players' Championship event. 8-7 in the final, a really high quality tournament from both. Johnny Clayton was a runner-up again on day 2, again in the last leg decider, lost out to young Geordie Callan Rydz, who picked up his first PDC senior title. Day 3 was all about Raymond van Barneveld, the 5-time world champion, just his 3rd event back on the tour, won his first ranking title for over 8 years, fairy tale story, and he beat Joe Cullen, the winner on day 1 in that final. And then day 4 finally saw Johnny Clayton pick up a deserved title, having been so consistent over the 4 days. He beat the Heat Damon Heta 8-6 to win his 2nd title of 2021. So Clayton was a star performer overall, reaching 3 finals out of 4 days.
Neil, that's a phenomenal performance to start the year off. You know, getting to any Players' Championship final is hard enough, but getting to 3 out of 4 in a series of events that run very, very closely together. You know, there's no break, there's no respite. To get to 3 out of the 4 of those finals between the 25th and the 28th, that takes some doing, doesn't it? From Clayton?
No, it does, and I think it shows the consistency that he's got at the moment. So obviously he's had a very strong start to the year, and he's got momentum. And as you say, with such a strong field and such a big field each day, to reach 3 finals in 4 days is a big achievement.
Yeah, most definitely. Josh, give me some more flesh on the bones about Callan Rydz claiming his first senior PDC ranking title. Maybe some of the people he beat on the way and his performance on the whole through PC2.
Yeah, Callan Rydz was really consistent over the course of the day, John. I think his lowest average was 90, so he's really consistent. He kicked off with 100 average against Boris Koltsov first round and only won in the deciding leg. He beat Alan Suter, who we're going to discuss later on, but he's had a fantastic start to life on the PDC circuit. He whitewashed Jeff Smith, very capable player from Canada. He thrashed Ian White 6-1 in the last day and beat Nathan Aspinall 7-2 in the semi-finals. So really, really convincing progression. And then, as I mentioned there, beating Johnny Clayton 8-7 in the final. Really high quality stuff, just over a 98 average, we've seen Callan show glimpses of his class over the last 18 months on the PDC circuit, but he was really consistent throughout. I think after the 8 events, he's in the top 20 in terms of the averages. So that just shows where his game's at, and he's certainly one to watch for the rest of 2021.
Neil, you mentioned Johnny Clayton there, obviously getting to 3 of the 4 finals, and Clayton is our 10th pick, obviously, for the Premier League. But some of the other big names, particularly Premier League players, are failing to make any of those finals, Neil.
Yeah, I think if you looked at the bookmakers' odds before each day, they wouldn't have been at the very top of the list. You would have seen the likes of Michael van Gerwen, Peter Wright and Gerwin Price. But as I said, Johnny Clayton's had some really good form over the past few months. Joe Cullen put in a very, very good performance at the World Championships. And then there's Damon Heta and Barney, who we know are very, very strong players. So apart from Callan Rids, yes, they're probably names that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be dominating, but good players nonetheless.
Josh, on the last show, we obviously discussed Raymond van Barneveld claiming back his tour card, and there was much excitement from fans all over the world to see Barney claim that back. But to see him come back and win Players Championship 3, I don't think it's unfair to say it was unexpected for him to claim his first ranking title since 2013. And Josh is a big fan of the big guy yourself. You must have been absolutely delighted with that.
Oh, it wasn't. I agree with you. It was unexpected. I mean, no one doubts Barney's ability or quality, but you're right, he hadn't won a ranking title since 2013, and I think fatigue is often a concern with Barney, but he had a tough route as well that day. I think he beat Rob Cross and Mervyn King, both in last leg deciders. He thrashed Darius Labanauskas with the performance of the day. I think a bit of revenge on Darius there for that World Championship defeat. But
which Neil likes to remind you about consistently.
He did, although Darius then did beat Raymond at the second Super Series, so they've still got that ongoing rivalry. But yeah, 106 average to beat Darius. Then he's past Alan Suter, averaged over 100 to beat Ian White in the semi-finals, and then that game against Joe Cullen, it was a fantastic final, and Joe outscored Raymond for large periods of that final, but Barney just hung in, took out a couple of big finishes when he needed to, and then it was a little bit of a scrappy, a bit of a nervy end, but a great game, and obviously a fairy tale return really in his third event since coming back to pick up a title. It should be a great tonic for him, and it puts him in a great spot now to qualify for both the World Championship and Players Championship finals at the end of the year. Yeah,
Neil, say what you like about Barney, but it's an incredible feat, isn't it, to be out of the game for that long, not only to then get his tour card, but to win Players Championship 3. That's got to be right up there with his list of achievements, do you think?
Yeah, I think so, because I don't think it was expected. And not only that, I mean, I was watching on YouTube, I think, the scoring in the final when he was up against it, and Joe Cullen was hitting some big numbers at one stage, and he responded and really pulled it out of the bag. So fair play to him. Much like Glenn Durrant, when he joined the PDC, he got a win in an early Players Championship on the Pro Tour. So, and I think that helped him settle down. And I know we'll talk about Barney and his health issues in a bit, but I think it will really help him going forward that he's not got that pressure of people saying that he's a past champion, but he can't reproduce that because he's already delivered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So many congratulations then to Joe Cullen, Callan Rids, Raymond van Barneveld, and of course Johnny Clayton. Great performances for those guys in Super Series 1. Josh, hot on the heels of that, obviously the UK Open took place between March the 5th and 7th from Milton Keynes, and my guy, Mr. James Wade, triumphed again, Josh, with his 10th major title.
It's a fantastic achievement from James. I think he's often underappreciated because he hasn't won the World Championship, which is the Holy Grail. So when you talk about all-time greats, some people don't always include James Wade. And I think if he had one World Championship, I think he'd be top 5, top 6 of all time. He's been that good. I think he's only the second person now behind Phil Taylor in the PDC to win a major in 3 separate decades. So incredible longevity from James. His third UK Open title, as he said, his 10th major, and he had a tough route as well all the way through the competition. He kicked off as a top 32 player. He got a bye through to the 4th round, but he survived the last leg decider in that game against Ryan Joyce, who we know is a very capable player. The last 32, he beat Rob Cross 10-7. A more comfortable game in the last 16, he beat Gabriel Clemens 10-5. The quarterfinals, he was up against it against Simon Whitlock 8-5 behind. And he reeled off 5 legs on the spin, a couple of really big checkouts at crucial moments to win that match. And then the semi-finals, everyone was talking about it being a Michael van Gerwen against Gerwin-Price final for the second year in succession. But Luke Humphries and James Wade didn't read the script, because Luke Humphries produced the performance of his life to beat Michael van Gerwen 11-5. And Wade, he eased past Gerwin-Price 11-6, really. Gerwin started poorly, but James was very, very consistent early on, and then was just very professional throughout. Just held his throw, 15 darts or less, pretty much all the way through. And then in the final, it was a case of missed doubles for Luke. He lived with James in the scoring department, but Wade is just so clinical under pressure. I think one of the best finishers under pressure in the world of darts. And he closed out an 11-5 win to pick up his third UK Open. So fantastic achievement from James Wade.
Neil, I remember, let me take you back sort of 2.5 years ago when we did the pilot episode of the Josh's Dartistry podcast. One of the first questions I asked both of you guys was what drew you into darts and your early darting memories. And Josh lamented about, Raymond van Barneveld and some BDO stuff and getting into the PDC. Neil, I remember you talking about some of the greats that you'd watched over the years, whether it's sort of the Eric Bristows and the John Lows of this world. And when you threw the question back at me, one of the names I remember speaking about who got me into darts as a sort of teenager was James Wade. To see James now still performing on the biggest stage of them all here in 2021, and as Josh mentioned there, only the second PDC player behind Taylor to win a major title in 3 separate decades. We do forget, don't we, how long James has been on the circuit now and what a veteran of the sport he is, Neil.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player, very successful player, and just hearing the fact that he's done it over 3 decades, just you look at James, he doesn't look. He still looks reasonably young, I think. He's
still only 37, so in terms of he's still young. Yeah,
so fantastic achievement for him to carry it on. I think probably just over 2 years ago he had a dip, and then he came back in real style, and I think he won 2 TV titles in a row. Yeah, he's someone that you don't want to play because if you're slightly off your game, even if he's not scoring as heavy as you, he's someone that's always capable of taking out ton-plus finishes and getting over the finish line. So, great player. I think, as we alluded to, or Josh alluded to, give him a world title, and then you're talking about one of the greats of in darting history, right up there with some of the very best, but a top player.
Josh, we spoke earlier about the Super Series 1 and some of the big names that didn't quite manage to perform across those 4 days. And looking at some of the exits in the early rounds of the UK Open, Wright, Anderson, Aspinall, Vandenberg, Cullen, King. Again, it was a tournament for perhaps some of the lesser names to have good runs in, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of the Open draw in the UK Open. It's called the FA Cup of Darts because it can pit anyone against anyone. I mean, Peter Wright, for example, lost out to Dave Chisnell. Gary Anderson lost out to Van Duivenbode. We had Aspinall go out to Ratajski. Joe Cullen played Michael Smith in an absolute barnstormer, and Mervyn King lost to Jose de Sousa, all in the 4th round. So quality lineup in that 4th round, and it did give some of the lesser lights, if you like, a chance to shine. We talked about Alan Soutar when we talked about Super Series 1. He was also a new tour card holder, came through UK qualifying school. He reached the quarterfinals in Players Championship 3. And he had a fantastic UK Open. He was pitted against Barney in the 2nd round. They met in the Super Series with Barney beating Soutar en route to winning the title. But Soutar got his revenge, beat Barney 6-3 and was convincing in that game. He also beat Stephen Bunting 10-5. And he lost out to Chizzy in the last 16. But it was his first PDC televised tournament, Alan Soutar. So to get to the last 16 and beat 2 former world champions, it's an absolute credit to him, and I think he's definitely one to watch over the next 2 years because he's just so unfazed by playing these big players. He's beaten Peter Wright, Aspinall, Lewis, Chisnell, Barney, Bunting, Durrant, Cullen, Gurney. He's just beaten such a list of top players.
Yeah, it's a good start to the year for Alan, and we all hope that he continues on that trajectory for the rest of the year. Josh, let's flip it over a little bit. Talk to me about Lisa Ashton. She obviously made her own little piece of history during the tournament.
She did, yeah. I mean, Lisa, we know, a 4-time women's world champion, fantastic player, fantastic ambassador for the sport. But one thing that has eluded her is a televised win in the PDC over a male opponent. She's come very, very close at the World Championships, at the Grand Slam, but not quite across the line. But she was drawn against Darren Beanie in the 2nd round of the UK Open, and she produced a fantastic display, 100.34 average, which was her highest average on TV, a record average for a woman on TV, And as a consequence, she ran out a convincing winner to beat Aaron Beanie and get her first televised win. So great achievement for Lisa. Unfortunately for her, she was beaten in the next round by Darius Labanauskas, who's very solid and has made a really solid start to 2021. A nice bit of history for Lisa there, and something to build on now for the rest of the year, because the monkey's off her back, if you like. And if she does qualify for more TV events, maybe the Grand Slam, the Players' Championship finals, or the Worlds, she isn't going in under that pressure, under that microscope of having never won on TV. So it's another obstacle that she's overcome.
Neil, just going back 15 short months ago, obviously all the talk was about Fallon Sherrock and her exploits in the Worlds, and, you know, she absolutely lit up the darting media with her performance at those World Championships. But, 15 months on, Lisa Ashton there, just reminding everybody that, you know, Fallon's not the only superstar female darts player we've got, and just giving everyone a nudge and saying, you know, I'm still here.
No, absolutely. And I think Lisa's a classy player, multiple world champion. And just like the men's game, I think the women's game is very competitive with some very, very good players.
Josh, you've already mentioned Luke Humphries, obviously, in the final against Wade, but a fantastic performance to beat Michael van Gerwen in the semi-final. And obviously MVG hasn't had things all his own way so far this year, Josh.
He hasn't, no. But in fairness to Michael, he did very little wrong in that semi-final. He averaged over 106. So, of course, Michael can play better. We've seen him average 120 before, but it was just a case of having to credit Luke Humphries for an amazing performance. Luke averaged over 107, took out 4 massive ton-plus finishes, all at crucial times as well, when Michael was sat on a double or a 2-dart combination. It was his performance of his life, really, from Luke Humphries. And I think the pace of the game had a major influence on it, because Luke is a player that likes to get on with it. He's got a great rhythm to his game, and Michael van Gerwen is not a player that employs tactics or slows the game down. So I think it played into Luke Humphries' hand. And yeah, I think everyone sort of thought after the semi-final, if he plays like that in the final against James Wade, we'll be seeing Luke Humphries lift the title. But as we so often see, it's never that simple in darts, and every game is a different game. I think Luke didn't have a lot of rest between the semi-final, which he alluded to in my interview with him. And James has been there, he's seen it, he's done it all. He's won so many of these titles, and he was just really professional in the final and got the job done. But take nothing away from a fantastic tournament for Luke Humphries. He's still only very young, only 26 years old, and he's got a very bright future ahead of him. And I think before this tournament, he'd only reached 2 World Championship quarterfinals, but besides that, he'd never really done anything on TV. So this is a major, major breakthrough for him in his career, I've got no doubt.
So I think, you know, he was World Youth Champion, I think, in 2019. Yeah. I think this could be a real breakout year for him. It's not, you know, his first year, as you say, he's been a quarter-finalist at 2 World Championships. But I think we could really see him get to the very top this year. He was relentless in that semi-final, clearly inspired by playing Van Gerwen, and there was just nothing that was going to stop him. So I think he's got the game. I think he's got the character to do it. I still think that playing Van Gerwen, you know, he's still the man that everybody wants to beat. And I think probably he put so much into that semi-final. He was a little bit flat going into the final, which is understandable. But as I say, I think that's because Van Gerwen is still the one that they want to beat, and that's the one that consumes most of their mental energy. But terrific performance.
Josh, as Neil says, lots of quality there at the end of the tournament, the semi-finals and the final. But we were treated to 2 9-darters on opening day, weren't we?
We were, and both of them involved Sebastian Bielecki, the 17-year-old from Poland. He's a very bright talent, appearing in his first PDC major tournament, and he hit the 9-darter in his opening round, and then had a 9-darter hit against him by the Dutchman Jitse van der Waal in the next round. So incredible, really, to be involved in 2 9-darters on the same day. We saw that at the Grand Prix, didn't we, a few years ago, with Wade and Thornton in the same match. But yeah, Bielecki performed fantastically well. Got to the 4th round, actually, where he's beaten by Mensur Suljovic. But a fantastic first tournament for him to get the 9-darters. Shame it wasn't live on TV. We were roughly following it via Darts Connect, but it wasn't on one of the live boards at the UK Open. That's a shame. We didn't see it live, but still a fantastic achievement nonetheless. And we've seen so many 9-darters this year, I think 7 in 8 Pro Tour events, and I'm sure they're going to keep on coming.
Okay, so many congratulations to James Wade. Josh, let's move on to Super Series 2, which quickly came around the corner, again from Milton Keynes. And talk to us about those 4 days.
Well, you alluded to earlier on, talking about Super Series 1, John, that some of the big guns, besides maybe Johnny Clayton, hadn't really performed, but they certainly made their mark in Super Series 2. The first of the 4 events, Players' Championship 5, was won by Brendan Dolan, beating Michael Smith 8-6 in the final. a third Pro Tour title in 2 years for Dolan, who's had a remarkable renaissance over the last 18 months or so. Then we saw Players' Championship 6 was won by Gerwyn Price, who won his first title as world champion, beating Luke Humphries in the final. So yet another final for Luke Humphries, his first on the Pro Tour. Then Players' Championship 7 saw Johnny Clayton pick up his second Pro Tour title of the year, his third in total, having won the Masters. He beat the UK Open champ James Wade 8-5 in that final. And then we saw Gerwyn Price reach another final in Players' Championship 8, but that was won by Peter Wright, who, as a consequence of winning that final, has now leapfrogged Michael van Gerwen to become the new world number 2. So that final was officially a battle between the world's top 2.
Wow. Lots going on there. Let's just pick the bones out of that. Price and Wright pick up their first titles of the new season, Josh, and I'm sure both of them players who are at the top of their game, but they'll be glad to secure those titles early doors, won't they, so they can kick on with the rest of their season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gerwyn Price, I think, wouldn't have felt pressure as such, but he wants to get that title under his belt. He's got the world title. The pressure's on him as such. There's a target on his back. He only played in 2 of the first Super Series events because he had an ear infection, so he went home early. As we alluded to, got to the semis of the UK Open and bowed out to James Wade. But Gerwyn Price really turned on the style in Milton Keynes for the second Super Series event, averaged over 100 for virtually the whole day in Players' Championship 6, and was just too good on the day for Luke Humphries. But it was a really important event for Peter Wright as well, because I was quite critical of him at the UK Open because he was chopping and changing his darts. We saw at the first Super Series, he was throwing some horrendous darts. They looked like javelins, and they were going in at all funny angles, and I think he had averaged 76 in one game, Peter Wright. And I was sitting there thinking, we know he's a tinkerer, but I think he was almost overcomplicating the game. So he went back to basics, his conventional setup for the second Super Series event, and it paid dividends. He was playing so much more consistently, and it's a great boost for him now going into the Premier League because he feels like now he set his stall out for the year, and this could lead on to better things for Peter Wright.
Neil, positives for Peter Wright and Gerwyn Price coming out of Super Series 2, but no such good news for a few other Premier League players. I'm particularly looking at probably Gary Anderson and Glenn Durrant, and maybe to a lesser degree Nathan Aspinall, but some players there, lacking a bit of form and not really coming to the forefold at the moment.
I think with Glenn, it's a continuation of what hasn't been his strongest form. After a great year last year where he won the Premier League. With Gary, I am surprised because although he hadn't played a lot, he had a very, very strong World Championship, getting all the way through to the final. So I was kind of expecting him to kick on, and he didn't. But it's still early days, even for the likes of Aspinall. He's a class player, and he's got himself to the top echelons of the game, and I expect him to stay there. For AD Lewis, I think the drop-off now, I expected him to bounce back, but he seems to be spending more and more time without reaching big finals, without winning tournaments. So it's difficult to see. And I think probably a year ago, I expected him to bounce back, but he hasn't. And I think it's difficult to see whether he actually will anytime soon.
Well, he's in danger of actually dropping out the world's top 32 by the World Championship if he doesn't get his act together on the Pro Tour, because at the moment, for like the match play, for example, it's a top 16, which he's not in.
Yeah.
If he doesn't get in the top 16 of the Pro Tour, he'll be out of the world match play, which means he'll then lose money from being in that 2 years ago. So it can be very difficult when you drop out of that elite.
Yeah.
Brendan Dolan, in fairness, has done that fantastically well. He dropped well out the top 32. And I think he's 32 or 33 now, but he's coming back. He's won 3 Pro Tour events. He's reinvented his game, Dolan.
Yeah.
Because he used to be very methodical, but he's picked up the speed of his throw. He's throwing the best darts of his life, and he averaged over 102 to win that Players' Championship event. But you're right in what you say, Neil, in terms of Aspinall. He's still a class player, and although he had a disappointing Super Series, I think one of the days he lost to Richie Edhouse in the first round, but he averaged 107.
Yeah.
That's one of those, yes, the results are disappointing, but you have to look at the performances. And I don't think he'll be too concerned. But
no, I don't think so. And I think, as I say, even Glenn, his form hasn't been great, but we know that him, Gary and Nathan will be at the top of the game this year, there or thereabouts. With AD Lewis, it's more difficult to see that happen.
Yeah. Agreed.
Josh, we mentioned the 2 9-darters on opening day during the UK Open, but the Pro Tour's been absolutely raining 9-dart finishes, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, in the first Super Series, we had 4 9-darters in successive days. So we had Marcus Smith on the first day, AD Lewis on the second, Menzel Silovic and Luke Woodhouse on the final 2 days. And then we had 3 9-darters in the second Super Series events. Some unconventional names, but maybe some surprise names you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. But Richie Edhouse, Wayne Jones and Mickey Mansell achieving perfection in Milton Keynes. So congratulations to all of those. They'll be getting their silver pins at the annual awards in 2022. So great achievement from them.
Josh, just to wrap up the Super Series chat, we did have some bad news come through and it was quite worrying at the time. I think thankfully everything's okay now and you're going to give us an update. But we had news come through that Raymond van Barneveld was feeling quite unwell and had sort of had a bit of a collapse at PC8.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was following Darts Connect, the scores on that Friday, and he'd got knocked out by Ryan Searle the first round. So he was marking a game, which is now customary. Because of COVID, there's not as many markers at the Pro Tour, so the players have to mark when they lose.
I love that. I love the thought of the players marking. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I'd love to see, a former world champion standing there marking for a couple of lesser now. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
The PDC put a picture up the other day, I think, of... They said a former world champion marking a former world champion. It was Gary Anderson marking a Peter Wright game, which is just mad. I think, to be fair, though, the old school like Anderson, Barney, Steve Beaton, Mervyn King, they'd have done that because that was par for the course 10, 15 years ago. But the newcomers to the tour, this will be all new to them because it's so professional, the PDC. I've been lucky enough to go to these Pro Tour events and you've got 16 markers for each board. So when you go out, you just go back to your hotel room and do whatever you like. But yeah, going back to Barney, the boards all suddenly... stopped playing. I was following the scores and just nothing updated. So I thought, had there been a fire alarm or what? But then we started getting news through that a player had been taken unwell. And I'd had about 4 or 5 messages from people either who were there or knew people who were there saying it was Raymond van Barneveld who had collapsed. And that's all we knew for about half an hour, which is obviously quite concerning. We all know it's well documented he suffers with diabetes. So I was hoping it was more of a diabetic episode than anything more sinister. But as you mentioned, thankfully it came out that it wasn't too serious in terms of he was treated by paramedics at the scene. He didn't have to be taken to hospital. I think he collapsed at first, literally at the end of the game he was marking between Deswan and Lurchbacher. They put him in the recovery position. They then tried to get him up and security tried to escort him out and help him out. Then he collapsed again, which is when they called in the paramedics. But they did all the assessments and thankfully he went back to his hotel room and he was monitored, but he's now fine. He's okay. It was just, I think it was a low blood sugar. So this obviously just shows how important it is to make sure you're 100% right. I think that his manager spoke to the Dutch press, aptly named Bendy Cock, his manager. That is a fantastic name, isn't it?
Do you want me to leave that in the podcast, Josh, or do you want to edit it out?
No, you leave that in. Leave that.
Anyway, there was an Instagram post as well from Barney, wasn't there, Josh?
There was, yeah. He let his fans know and thanked everyone for the support and the PDC staff and all the paramedics. But yeah, there was a lot of concern because it's very rare that you see these Pro Tour events suspended or, not abandoned, but suspended. But I was quite encouraged when I saw that they were resuming play at about 3:00 because I thought if it was anything more sinister, they wouldn't be resuming. But thankfully, yeah, Barney updated everyone on, I think it was Saturday evening. So, yeah, it's just a case of him now just resting up. And he's got a month's break, I think, before the next set of Super Series events, which are in Germany at the end of April. But in terms of his health, he's probably fitter now than he was 15, 20 years ago. He's looked after himself. And I think he's realised, being a diabetic, that he does need to do that. So that's why it came as a bit of a shock to everyone. But thankfully, he's okay. But I think it just shows, you have to be so careful in terms of your preparation because he hadn't eaten, I think, after he'd lost his match. And then the match he was marking went on for over half an hour, and that's, I think, what's caused the collapse.
Neil, it's not for us to speculate about anybody's medical conditions, but do you think that Barney's just got to be that little bit more careful now? Obviously, Josh mentions there that he does have the diabetes issue, and he's coming back from a period of relative inactivity, throwing himself back onto the tour. The schedules, as we've mentioned time and time again on this show, pretty grueling. Just got to be a little bit careful, hasn't he?
He has, and I think it must be difficult when you're travelling and you're staying in hotels and you've got to manage your diet in a way because you've got that illness. So you do need to take care. Otherwise, it's unfortunate. There will be episodes like this. I think even just standing for a long time can cause people to pass out and faint. But to add the added complication of diabetes as well. Yeah, it was worrying at the time. Josh was messaging me, but thankfully he was okay. But yeah, he will need to look after himself going forward.
Yeah, we send our very best wishes to Raymond and the team for a speedy recovery, and I have no doubt whatsoever that we'll see him back back on the stage, lighting up the Oki in the not-too-distant future. Many congratulations to Brendan Dolan, Gerwyn Price, Johnny Clayton, and, of course, Peter Wright on their wins for Super Series 2.
This is Danny Baggish, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
You're listening to Josh's Dartistry. Don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook by going to the Josh's Dartistry page. You can follow us on Twitter at Josh's Dartistry, or go to the website www.joshisdartistry.com for the latest news and insight to the world of darts. You can also leave us a comment or a question via our voicemail box. Just call 07739 738 329. Leave us a message and we may play it on air. Now back to the show.
Hi, I'm Gerwyn Price, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Okay, Josh, we mentioned at the top of the show you managed to secure an interview with UK Open finalist Luke Humphries.
I did indeed, yeah. Awfully Luke in really positive spirits after getting to his first major final. Really confident about his form and looking forward to what he hopes will be a very big year for him.
Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry.
Right, guys, I'm delighted here to be joined by the former World Youth Champion and recent UK Open finalist Luke Humphries. Luke, many thanks for joining me, mate.
Yes, no problem. It's good to be on.
You've had time now, Luke, to reflect on the UK Open last week, reaching your first major final. Just how pleased were you with your performances over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really pleased, obviously. You know, I'd obviously had the back end of a not a great World Championship, and it was really important for me to bounce back in the way I did. It could have been the only sort of major I played in for a long time, and I know I had to make an impact.
You had a number of tight games in that tournament. I think against Kim Huybrechts, your first game on that Friday night was 10-8. You had a great game against Ryan Searle, the Chizzy game 10-9 in the quarterfinals. You produced some great darts in the latter stages of that, but on the floor over recent weeks or over recent months, you've had a lot of last leg defeats. So how pleasing was it for you to be on the right end of the results this time?
Yeah, I mean, I showed a lot of resilience, I thought. You know, obviously, there was a couple of games where I think I might have been like against Kim maybe 7-6 down, and against Ryan, well, I think I was 7-6 down as well, something like that. And I showed good grit and determination to take the game away from them. You know, I think I had, I don't know if it's both games, but I know I had 3 or 4 legs on the trot against Kim and Ryan that, you know, it was hard for them to do anything about because I hit some really good legs in there. And that is something obviously I want to add to my game as a whole. Because, you know, I know I have the ability to take the game away from people within an instant, you know, my fast throwing action. You know, I can take the game away from someone in the split of a second. And, you know, it was pleasing to sort of get in them positions and not throw them away like I usually do. Because I think over the last sort of 3 or 4 years I've been a professional, I've had a lot of games where I've been in control or been there or thereabouts and you know, thrown it away. So it was really important for me to, you know, finish off them games. And it just like Chizzy as well, you know, 9-7 down. Maybe a couple of years ago, I probably would have thrown the towel in, but when you're in a major quarterfinal, you have to give everything, and that really helped me. And obviously, you know, that will help me in confidence in future references for when I'm, you know, 3 legs behind in any game, and knowing I can come back and win, and it's given me good confidence. But on the Pro Tour, you know, I've had a few 6-5 losses, I know, and you know, I did get a little bit of a name for it about, you know, losing last leg deciders, but it wasn't any fact of me bottling them or you know, not hitting the doubles when I missed it. It was really more of a, you know, it would be when I've lost the ball or something, and they'd throw 15 darts or 12 darts. You know, there's not really much I could do, and I sort of got out of that a little bit in the back end of last year, and then it started happening again. But it's nothing I worry about because, you know, I don't feel like I get nervous or anything, or nothing goes bad. It's just they always seem to put in a good last leg against me. That won't always happen. But as long as I keep sticking in there and keep throwing good last legs, and you know, I'll get my turn of win 6-5 my way.
We can't really talk about the UK Open without mentioning that amazing semi-final against Michael van Gerwen, probably the performance of the tournament from you. We hear about players when they get into that zone where they feel like they just can't miss. Is that what happened to you in the semis? Because some of your finishing, particularly the ton pluses, were just out of this world.
Yeah, obviously, I think it was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people the way I played there, and it also was not a surprise to a lot of people. Because, you know I can play this a lot. It's just I don't produce it enough. And I think, you know, my scoring against Michael was fantastic. But that's nothing different to me. Without sounding big-headed, I score like that quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's usually my finishing that lets me down. And, I know that if I can hit my finishes, and a lot of people know as well, if I can hit my finishes a lot more often than I do, I can do some great things. And I think over the last sort of 2 years in the World Championships, the two quarterfinals, if you look on the stats, my finishing was up in the top 5 or top 10. So, and look what I've got. I know I'm one of them players where, if I can sort of get better on the finishing side aspect, I know my game will rise up and I'll get better. And the game against Michael was just unbelievable. Obviously, I felt like I could win, but I just never, in my mind, imagined dispatching of him in a way that I did, especially as he was playing so well himself.
I was going to mention that. Is that what gave you the most confidence? Not just beating Michael 11-5, but beating Michael 11-5 when he was averaging 106, because he did very little wrong. You just ran into an inspired opponent in your case.
Yeah, I mean, when I walked off, I didn't really realise how well I played, obviously. I thought I played well, but I just didn't realise how well. And, obviously when I walked off, I spoke to someone that was close to me that sits there with us, and he said, do you know how well you played that? I said, yeah, I played all right. And he said, you averaged nearly 108, and I just thought, really? I didn't think I played so well. Obviously, when you're in these high intense games, you don't really focus on how well you're playing. I just knew I played well. And obviously I knew Michael had played well. I think he had one mistake in the whole game, and that was missing the 6 darts at a double in one of the legs, allowed me to punish him, and that was his only mistake. So, I don't think anybody can criticise him for losing in that game, because, at the end of the day, they're going to happen, and they happen to me a lot as well. But obviously, it's a different aspect beating Michael, especially when he's playing at his best. So that was the most pleasing thing for me, was beating him when he was pretty much. I know he can play better, but at an average, at his best.
You referenced it in your post-match interview after losing to James in the final. I mean, the final, it was a lot closer than the scoreline suggested, just a few missed doubles here and there. But how tough was it for you to recover from that game mentally against Michael? Reaching your first major final, and then suddenly 20 minutes later, you're back on the oche. Was that tough to adjust to?
It was a bit, obviously, because I didn't even get a chance to sit down. I would obviously have been practicing a good hour and a half beforehand, and not thinking about the final. All I was preparing for was that semi-final.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that was in my mind. So, obviously that's all I was sort of focusing on, and I'd obviously been up on my feet an hour and a half, then I'd go and play the game, then come back, usually want at least 10 minutes to sit down and to think about things, think about what you've just done. But I didn't have that, I had no time, and, there's no disrespect to the ITV or the PDC, but there is surely a way that they can implement a little bit more of a longer break in there or something, because it's more of an advantage for the first semi-finalist than it is the second semi-finalist.
Yeah.
And in my mind, looking back, as I've reflected, I think that, as I'm thinking, I was probably thinking, wow, I'm in a major final, I'm in the Grand Slam, this is brilliant, happy days. Whereas if I had 10 minutes to sit down and think about things, I probably would have thought to myself, no, you're in a major final now, you don't get these every day, you can go on and win this. And I didn't give my chance to my brain to tell myself that. And I think, in a way, that was what cost me. I didn't have that chance to sit down and believe that, this next game is the biggest game of your life, not just winning a great game against Michael. This game means much more than any game you'll ever play in. And I think if I could have had that 10 minutes to sit down, it might have been a different game, but fatigue did creep in a little bit and a few doubles were dropping low. But I still think my scoring was good in the final. It was just a double.
Just looking at the UK Open as a whole, you've had some fantastic achievements already in your relatively young career. You've won the World Youth Championship. You're so prolific on the development tour, back-to-back World Championship quarter-finals. But reaching your first major final, would you say that's been the best weekend of your career so far?
Yeah, the three achievements you sort of said there, they're all great achievements, and it's hard to sort of judge where to put them, where to rank them. Obviously, winning a World Youth title, many people might think that's not really nothing to shout about. For me, I think it is. I'd obviously wanted to win a World Youth title and then win the proper world title. I think that's a great stepping stone. So, and then you can move on to the quarterfinals of the world. In the biggest competition there is, 2 quarterfinals is fantastic. But I think, reaching that major final, and maybe the way I did it on the final day, was probably the greatest weekend of my life. Obviously, I wanted to win it, and then there would have been no doubt it would have been. But yeah, personally, I would say it's definitely the best part of my career so far. A lot of people forget, I'm very young still in this game. I'm not a young person, but I mean, in this game I am.
Oh yeah.
You can have a long career in darts, so I'm relatively young. This is only my 4th year, I think, as a professional. So making 3 major quarterfinals and obviously going on to get to a final and winning the World Youth title. I'm happy with my progress, and I know a lot of people sort of try and rush it and say, oh, he needs to be in this, he needs to be in that, he needs to be in match play. I don't need to, At the end of the day, that will come in time. I don't need to rush my progress. It's all about just taking things as they come and slowly progressing.
It's interesting you say that, because when I look at the stats last year on the Pro Tour, I think you were 15th in terms of the averages.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And I think it would be fair to say you didn't get the result that your performances deserve. But are you quite philosophical about that, and you think, well, it's nothing to worry about, I'm playing well, if I carry on playing to that standard, the results will come?
Yeah, that is definitely something I obviously think about. You can't get upset with I couldn't get upset with the way I played last year.
No.
I obviously had a couple of games that I lost that I shouldn't have and ways like that, but I think I was running at maybe the last weekend was what dropped me off. I think I was like 8th or 10th before the last week, averaging like 96. But really, I couldn't really sit at home and ponder on it and say, that was a bad season, because it wasn't. I played well. I just ran into a few inspired opponents that, matched the game I was playing against them. That's just one of them things that Dartistry is getting like. It's getting to a level was very hard to compete. You can easily average 100 and lose the game. So, I think if I'm going to keep at that level consistently every year, there is going to come a time when it comes. There will come a time where I will start winning Pro Tour titles, and obviously I know a lot of people say it, and I know myself that I'd probably underperform on the floor, but I'm not the only one, and my floor form is exactly the same as my stage game. People don't realise that. It's just a lot of other players don't bring their floor game to the stage. I'm pretty much the same. My floor game is as good as my stage game, but some players are not so good on the stage as they are on the floor, and that's why everyone thinks I'm a stage player. But really, in reality, I probably played better on the floor last year than I did on the TV.
And we know how grueling the Pro Tour is in terms of the standard, but also their long days. And I know you've lost quite a bit of weight already over the last few months, I think about over 2 stone in weight. So do you feel like it's already having a real positive impact on your game?
Well, yeah, I think, it's given me a good sort of sense there. It has, obviously. It was one of the main reasons I did it. I felt myself getting a little bit tired in the long days, and when we start in the competitions at 12, if I was in the last 16, I was getting a little bit tired and fatigued, and I knew I had to change something, because if I didn't, I was never going to win a Pro Tour title. After the World Championships, I made a conscious decision to do it, and it's benefited me in a lot of ways, not just darts, but in all aspects of life. Mentally I feel good and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a big help, and obviously it looks like he's working at the moment, but I ain't finished yet. I know I've got a lot more weight to lose to be at my best. And personally, I only think it's going to help me.
Of course, and looking ahead now, we're on the horizon of the second set of Super Series. But how much belief and confidence have you taken from your performances at the UK Open? And has it given you more hunger and more drive to think, I've had a taste of being in a major final now, I want another taste of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, obviously it's one of the things now where you've got a target on your back. I think, whoever I draw tomorrow, the name of maybe in the headlines that they've knocked the UK Open runner-up out, and that's what people look for. You want to be in the headlines. You want them sort of things. So obviously I'm going to have a target on my back now. I know that. But I also think a lot of people are going to sort of sing from the weekend how well I can play. And they won't take me lightly. I'm talking the top players. Not just everyone. I'm talking mainly the top players. They will know now what I'm capable of. Obviously, if you can beat Michael like I did, I can beat anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. And they would take note of that. And I think that the top players is what I want. Them to know my game and not to underestimate me. Obviously this is time for me to kick on. I want to be in obviously all the majors. That's what I strive for. That's what I want to be in. And obviously making a final major obviously puts you in that bracket of the Premier League and stuff. And obviously I'm not thinking of that yet. I'm not thinking I deserve it or that I'm going to be picked, because I know that's miles away yet. But I know that if I have a good year, and maybe even get to another major final, even win a major, or win a title somewhere. It's obviously going to put my name in the mix, and that's what I want. I want to be playing the best dart players week in, week out, and the Premier League's the best place, and hopefully, I can do that and have a great year and get picked for the Premier League, and then PDC can, reward me with a bit of success from what I've done.
And you're on the verge of breaking into the world's top 32. I think you're 33 now, and you haven't got too much big prize money to defend until the next World Championship. So are you viewing that as a real opportunity to break into the top 32 and beyond?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it is a great. I've already been in the top 32, so I was there for a few weeks, so I know how it feels anyway. I've already broke that top 32 barrier, so it's not like it's something that I feel I'm so close to. No. I need to grab hold of because I've already been there. And so the next step for me is obviously the top 16 before it feels any different. But obviously I want to be in the top 32. I think in the next few months, with money coming off from certain players, I think I might just go back in there without anything random happening. Below me, people doing really well. So I should be back in there soon. And obviously, I want to stay in there. I don't want to keep fluttering inside, outside, inside. I want to stay in there now. And if I want the top 16 in the world in the next sort of 5 years, 3 to 5 years, I know that I'm only going to get that by staying in that top 32. And I think that it's a great achievement to be in that sort of bracket, especially with how many good players there are nowadays. And it feels really good that my game's sort of adapting and getting better every year. And I just keep creeping up and creeping up and creeping up and getting to my full potential.
And just finally, Luke, have you set yourself any targets for 2021 in terms of either results or performances? I mean, I think in terms of the match play, you're about £6,000 out of qualifying for that at the moment, so it might take a run to a Pro Tour final. But are you targeting a match play debut, or is it just more about performances for you at the moment?
Well, I've obviously got my eyes set on it. Obviously I want to be in the match play, but, obviously... if it doesn't happen, then that's my own fault because I didn't really have a great start to the qualifying criteria when it opened. The last sort of whenever it opened, I think it would have been about 8 months ago. I haven't really had a great time on the floor, so so it's only my own fault. Obviously, this is still an opportunity for me now. I think probably I'd have to win a Pro Tour, but with this newfound confidence, I think that is something that can happen. And obviously, I'm going to try to qualify for it. But next year will be the one where I will think. It has to happen. 5 years as a pro, it's time to start being in them competitions. Obviously, the Grand Prix still open as well. There's a long way to go for that.
Yeah.
If I can get to a final, that would definitely put me in in that bracket. Not definitely being in, but it would definitely put me in the bracket for getting to a final or something. So yeah, there's lots to play for this year. Obviously, I didn't set myself any specific target. One target I did set myself was to make a major quarter final. Actually,
you've done that already. Well, you've easily done that. Then.
I've done that already. I've exceeded all expectation there. So, and it was to make a Pro Tour final. There was the two sort of goals, and I've done one, and I do believe I can do the other. It's just going to take a bit of time. It could be tomorrow. It could be next month. It could be at the end of the year. I know the ability is there, and it's up to me. If my doubles go, I know my day can come. That's the only thing that I need to do is to get them doubles and my finishing be solid. Everyone knows how good my scoring is, so obviously I know what I need to practice. I know where I need to get better, and that Pro Tour win won't be far away.
Well, listen, Luke, it's been fantastic to watch you over the last couple of years now, and fantastic achievement at the UK Open. We wish you all the very best for the Super Series and the rest of 2021, mate. Thank you very much for speaking to me.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it, and thank you.
Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry.
There you go. There is Josh's interview with UK Open finalist Luke Humphries. Luke was really proud there, wasn't he, of reaching his first major final, and you could hear how pleased he was with his performance.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a fantastic few years for him. As Neil mentioned earlier, he was World Youth Champion in 2019. He made back-to-back World Championship quarterfinals. Now got to a major final. He's only 26 years old. In darting terms, he's a bit of a baby, isn't he? Really. I mean, so he's got so much more to give the game. And I agree with Neil. I think he's really one to watch for the rest of 2021. He's a fantastic player. I really like his attitude. And he's overcome a lot of adversity as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Luke progresses for this year and beyond. And
Neil, it's nice to hear Luke talk in positive fashion and, hear him talking about, wanting to be a Premier League player in the future. Hopefully that's something that he can realise and achieve.
Yeah, and I think he will. I think I said it earlier. I think he's proved he's got the game. I think he knows he's got the game. I think the inner belief is there, so I think it'll be a matter of time. Even could be as soon as next year.
Okay, well, we thank Luke for taking the time to come and have a quick chat with Josh. Very kind of you, Luke. You're always welcome on the JDP, and we wish you all the very best for the rest of 2021.
Hello, I'm John McDonald, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Right then, gents, let's have a chat about the Premier League and get some odds from Neil. This is What Are the Odds?
Cool, what are the odds?
Okay, Josh, the next competitive darts on the horizon is the Premier League, kicking off behind closed doors in Milton Keynes. We've got 5 nights, haven't we, from April the 5th, and then an additional 4 from April the 19th. Josh, you looking forward to the Premier League starting up again?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it a lot, John. I'll be working, I think, 13 of the 16 nights for Sky, so that should be good fun. It goes without saying, it's not going to be the same without the crowds. They make the Premier League in terms of the atmosphere. But it's still going to be a really intriguing season because we've got a lot of players, I think, out of a bit of form. A lot of players who we're not quite sure of their form. And I think a lot of the debutants could really surprise. We saw last year Glenn Darrant and Aspinall on debut, got to the final. I think we could see similar maybe with the likes of Johnny Clayton and Jose de Sousa this year. So it should be really interesting. Okay,
so on that basis, and to perhaps guide us through and give us an idea of what to expect from the Premier League, let's hand you over to resident odds checker, Mr. Neil Connor.
Thanks, John. And I think Johnny Clayton is the biggest mover in the odds. I think we did discuss the odds on the last show. Sporting Bet, I've got Johnny into 9-1, so I think that's evidence of the great form that he's shown at the start of the year and the great levels of consistency. So Johnny's into 9-1. Michael van Gerwen remains the bookies' favourite at 9-4. Closely followed by Gerwin Price at 5-2. We've then got former world champion Peter Wright at 11-2, Johnny at 9-1, Dimitri van den Berg 12-1, Gary Anderson, I think we mentioned last time, a lot of value in him also at 12-1, and then Jose de Sousa 16s, current holder Glenn Durrant 25s, Nathan Aspinall 25s, and the outsider is Rob Cross at 40s.
Interesting. Josh, you mentioned earlier on when we were talking about doing a show tonight that we could possibly have a look at giving our top 4 predictions for the Premier League, who we think is going to finish in that top 4, and maybe also have a discussion about the 2 players that are going to be eliminated on Judgment Night, April the 22nd. On that basis, gentlemen, I'm going to play a jingle now that we haven't played in a very long time. This is Josh's Crystal Ball. Yeah, that's right. It's Josh's Crystal Ball. It's the time that we get Josh to nail his colours to the mast. And in a few months' time, that means I can call this audio back up and throw it in his face when it all goes horribly wrong. And we all ask him what he thinks he's doing because he's supposed to be a darts expert. That's normally what we do with Josh's Crystal Ball, isn't it, Josh?
Pretty much sums it up. Yeah, that's right, John.
Okay, let's go to the expert first then. Come on in, Josh. Top 4 predictions and elimination potentials. Go on.
It's a bit of a minefield this year because I've mentioned there's so many players who are out of form at the moment, or we just don't know their form in some cases. Michael van Gerwen, I'm going to say tops the league this year. And that might be controversial to some. It might not be to others. But he's topped it in 7 of the 8 years he's been in it. Last year he finished 6th, of course. I know he hasn't won anything so far in 2021, but I still think he'll be the most consistent in terms of performances. I think he'll top it. I'm going Gerwin Price to make the top 4 for the first time. He's never done that before. I think this year he'll do so. I've got to back the form horse in Johnny Clayton. He's playing, in my opinion, the best darts out of anyone in this year's Premier League. I know it's his debut season, but I'm going to back Johnny to reach the top 4 on debut. And then I was in a bit of a quandary about the 2 Scotsmen but I'm going to plump for Gary Anderson, purely on the basis that I can see Peter Wright becoming embroiled in changing his darts every other day. I think if Peter Wright sticks to a setup, I think he'll make the top 4, but I can't have that guarantee. So I'm going to go for Gary to make up the top 4. Do you want me to give you my elimination?
Yeah, give us your eliminations as well. Go for it.
Again, I could have egg on my face here, but I'm going to go for the 2 players that reached last year's final to be eliminated.
Wow.
I'm going to go for Glenn Durrant and Nathan Aspinall to be eliminated. Rob Cross, for me, is also in danger of falling into that bracket. He was eliminated last year, Rob Cross, and his form's been a little bit unconvincing. But Glenn, out of all the 10 players, is the most out of form in terms of averages, in terms of results. And I'm not doubting his pedigree, and he will bounce back. As Neil said, I've got full confidence he will. But this year's Premier League is taking place starting in 2 weeks' time, and it'll be done by the end of May. So is that enough time for Glenn to recover? I'm not too sure. And Nathan, he's been inconsistent since reaching that Premier League final. He's not had the greatest of results. Yeah, I think it's between, on current form, Cross, Aspinall and Durrant. And I'm just going to go with Aspinall and Durrant, but who knows?
Okay, good. I'll give you mine. I think MVG will top the list. I think he'll find form. It's a format, obviously, that he's very, very used to. Regular competitor. I'm going to back Durrant. I'm going to go completely against you here, Josh.
Ooh,
I'm going to back Durrant to get his arse in gear. Find that Premier League form that took him all the way to the win last time out. I think he's too good a player to finish in the elimination. I think he'll rise to the top and finish in the top four. I'm going to back a resurgent Gary Anderson as well. Again, someone who knows that tournament inside out. Although it's in a slightly different format, I still back Ando to get into that top four. And of course, Gerwyn Price. I think it's very, very hard to ignore. Although he's not done the top four position, as you said, Josh, he's certainly a much different player to what he was a year ago, 2 years ago, when he's been competing in the Premier League. So they're my top picks. Bottom of the pile, Judgment Night. I'm going to, again, go completely against you, Josh. I'm going to go with Johnny Clayton.
Wow.
On debut, I think he's performed exceptionally well at the start of the year, obviously. But there is something to be said for peaking too early. And I think we may have already seen the best of Johnny Clayton this year. And my second pick to finish bottom of the pile is D'Souza, unfortunately. Again, purely based on experience. I think there's more to come from him in the future. But this time round, I'm predicting a miserable Premier League for D'Souza. Sorry about that. Right, Neil, let's hand it over to you. What are you thinking?
So I am thinking top four: Gary Anderson, Michael van Gerwen, Peter Wright, and Gerwyn Price. So again,
go out on a limb, wouldn't you, Neil? Blimey.
Yeah, I considered Johnny Clayton and Dimitri, but I'm going to stick with those four. The two to miss out, I'll go also with Jose D'Souza, and I'll go with Rob Cross.
Rob Cross. Don't fancy Rob, no, Neil?
No, I think I've been waiting too long now for him to bounce back to form. And it's not happening. So he will be in the bottom two, in my opinion.
Josh, you will be interested, won't it, with the revised format this year to see how the players adapt. There's me talking about, certain players that know this tournament inside out and have got experience, but it is a very different tournament this time around, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there will be some that are used to it more than others because they played in it last year, where the second half of the season was behind closed doors. But it will maybe alleviate that pressure on the likes of D'Souza, Clayton and Van den Berg, who haven't experienced the Premier League in a full season before. It's more almost like a Pro Tour event, isn't it, behind closed doors? The PDCF said they might be able to welcome some fans to the latter stages. Obviously, they're in the hands of the government and the authorities, but it will be different. And also, usually the Premier League, it's on a week-by-week basis. So you've got time to reverse your form, if you like, if you're struggling, whereas here, it's back-to-back nights. So if you're in a bad rut of form, and you could lose 5 games on the spin quite easily or win 5 games on the spin. So momentum's going to be a big thing here. But it should be really exciting. I think it's the most wide-open Premier League we've ever had, in my opinion. It's so wide open. I wouldn't be surprised if any of the team made the top 4. Honestly. I mean, I know I've backed Glenn Durrant and Nathan Aspinall to be eliminated. That's on current form. But it wouldn't shock me if one of them made the top 4. That's how open it is this year.
Okay, well, there you go. There is the panel's picks for the Premier League this year. Do get in touch with us. Let us know what you think, who your top 4 will be, and obviously the 2 players eliminated on Judgment Night. You can get in contact with us by following the Josh's Dartistry Twitter account at Josh's Dartistry, or you can post us a message on the Josh's Dartistry Facebook page.
Cool. What are the odds?
Hello everybody, I'm Glenn Durrant and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
You're listening to Josh's Dartistry. Don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook by going to the Josh's Dartistry page. You can follow us on Twitter at Josh's Dartistry, or go to the website www.joshisdartistry.com for all the latest news and insight into the world of darts. You can also leave us a comment or a question via our voicemail box. Just call 07739 738 329 and leave us a message, and we may play it live on air. Now back to the show.
This is Damon Hedder, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Right, gents, before we move to the end of the show and get some questions in from the listeners, just a couple of things, Josh, that I think you wanted to have a chat about. The first two centering around Michael Van Gerwen, obviously his absence at Super Series 2, Josh, being a talking point, and also Peter Wright's comments recently on Michael Van Gerwen. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, when I mentioned to you about we don't know the form of some players, in terms of Michael Van Gerwen, his last outing was the UK Open, but by the time he turns up for the Premier League, we won't have seen him for over a month. He opted out of the second Super Series. We don't know the reasons, whether it was a family issue or not. I don't know. He might have just been taking some time off. We haven't got any confirmation of that. But it was quite a surprise, considering that there aren't that many tournaments at the moment. And like I say, after the UK Open, they had the Super Series, but then there's nothing now to the Premier League. So whether he's been working hard on the practice board, just wanted a little bit of time away to work on something, who knows? But he could come in a little bit cold to the Premier League. And Peter Wright was quite critical of Michael Van Gerwen's decision to opt out of the Super Series. Peter was speaking to Dan Dawson for the PDC after winning his title at Players' Championship 8. And he claimed that Michael Van Gerwen would not win a televised title in 2021, which is a extraordinary statement, really, considering Michael's won at least one title every year for the last 9. And Peter, I think speaking to Dan, he was really critical about him, called him arrogant, I think, for not turning up, saying he shouldn't be holidaying now, he should be here practicing. He's a fantastic player and obviously he knows what to do, but there's too many good players around. So Peter Wright is laying down the gauntlet to Michael Van Gerwen. He's done that a few times before in the past, and it's not always ended well for Peter Wright. I think he did it before the Grand Slam of darts, and Peter suffered an early exit, and then 2 weeks later, Michael won the Players' Championship final. So whether it'll fire up Michael Van Gerwen, who knows? But it's an interesting comment from Peter Wright, that's for sure.
Neil, is Michael Van Gerwen the kind of player who can hit the ground running at a big event like the Premier League, coming off the back of a lack of darting action? Can he cope with that, or is he, human like every other darts player and needs to be in that rhythm to start a big competition like the Premier League? What do you think?
It's a difficult one to answer because I think he hasn't got a lot of momentum at the moment. So maybe the chance to take a break and recharge will do him good. As I say, it can work both ways. He could come back rusty, which means that it's going to take him 2, 3, 4 nights to get going. But he may have time within the Premier League tournament itself to find his form, even if it does take 2 or 3 weeks. So difficult to say. With someone with so much natural ability, if he's recharging the batteries and he feels a bit mentally fresher, then it may work in his favour.
Yeah, Josh, there will be some people who will argue that a player of Michael Van Gerwen's ability and someone who's got such a decorated, career and a trophy cabinet that's fit to burst in 4 days in Milton Keynes isn't really going to affect Michael's performance too much at the Premier League. What do you say to people who might lean on that side of the debate?
I think it's a fair argument. And like I say, we don't know the circumstances behind Michael's withdrawal, whether it was just a case of he wants to spend some time with the family, whether it was just, he wanted a bit of time to hone his skills and practice away from a competitive environment. We don't know. But we saw Michael didn't participate in the PDC home tour last year. And now I know that's very different to major events, but he did turn up a little bit rusty to the likes of the World Match Play and the Premier League when it resumed. He really struggled and missed out on the top 4 altogether. So it's impossible to tell. But more than that, he hasn't won a title yet in 2021. Yes, he's not played in many events, only the 4 Super Series initially and then the UK Open. But the longer it goes, the more questions will be posed towards Michael. He's now world number 3, that Peter Wright's overtaken him. He will want to send out a statement to the rest of the field, and he can do that by topping the Premier League table, which I think he might do. But if he doesn't, people will question his decision to skip these second Super Series events, because Michael cherished his ranking as world number 1. He had it for over 7 years. So to slip down to world number 3, it's no crisis, of course. But he will be hurt by that. He'll want to reclaim his spot. And the best way to do that is by winning tournaments and turning up to these Pro Tour events like Gerwyn Price and Peter Wright have done. So who knows? But Michael Van Gerwen knows his game better than anyone else. But it will be interesting. And if he doesn't hit the ground running in the Premier League, there will be questions asked.
Neil, do you subscribe to the line of thought that I do, to be honest? Peter Wright's comment that Michael Van Gerwen won't win a televised title in 2021, I find those comments very dangerous from Peter Wright. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think sometimes it's best to say nothing, because those words can easily come back to haunt you. So, if Van Gerwen is aware, and I'm sure if he's not, he'll be made aware of it. I'm sure that'll add some determination to the fold for the future tournaments.
I'm reminded of Neil when you and I shared a football dressing room together as coach and assistant manager, or a manager and assistant manager, and it would only take some comments from an opponent manager the previous week, or a newspaper clipping or something like that, and we would post those comments up in the dressing room, and it would effectively do our team talk for us. And I think that kind of thing coming from Peter Wright could motivate Michael in a way that perhaps Peter didn't realise.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sometimes the words coming from the opposition can inspire you on to greater things. I think it wasn't just opposition, John. I think we tried that psychology on some of our players sometimes. So I remember telling our goal scorer that whilst he was top scorer in the league at one point, I didn't expect him to finish there at the end of the season.
But Peter Wright and Michael, they've got previous in this, like I mentioned. I think at the start of the year, Michael was critical of Peter Wright making these big outlandish comments. And part of me thinks Peter Wright does it almost to try and spur Michael on, because he wants to see Michael competing at his best against him. But it is a dangerous tactic. And I think at the start of the year, Van Gerwen said every year he says he's going to be number one in the world, but he wasn't right. It's very easy. They'll always say things, but I'm not going to involve myself in these silly games. Let them talk with the darts, but they all still have a really, really bad record against me, which we can't really argue with. So it could be a bit of a red rag to a bull with Michael Van Gerwen, and you could come out firing, and Peter Wright's comments could look a little bit foolish, but we'll just have to wait and see on that score.
Yeah, we'll see how that pans out. Josh, just looking down at some of the other discussion points that you wanted to throw in this evening. Was James Wade unfortunate to miss out on a Premier League spot? ? It says here on my agenda. Yeah, thoughts? What are your thoughts on that, and why are you bringing that to the table this evening?
Well, I remember on Twitter you posted a comment after he won the UK Open. I did a tweet about James making history, reaching double figures in terms of TV titles, winning another UK Open. And you said, how unfortunate you felt he was to miss out on the Premier League. And a lot of people have mentioned it. And it's a tough one. I think he's unfortunate, but I understand why the PDC left him out originally. But a lot of the talk, if you remember, we discussed before Johnny Clayton won the Masters, we were discussing the candidates to get the 10th spot. And a lot of people mentioned Dave Chisnell after his World Championship performance. And a lot of people mentioned Michael Smith. But James Wade did reach 2 major finals last year. Granted, he didn't win either of them, but he got to the European Championship final, got to the Grand Slam final. Was in the top 6 or 7 of the world, I think. I think where he's unfortunate is that everyone who's in the Premier League this year won a major last year, with the exception of Rob Cross, who was in the top 4 of the world when it was chosen. So he was an automatic qualifier. Now, James, by winning the UK Open, has actually overtaken Rob Cross, is world number 4. Cross is 5th. If Cross was 5th at the time of choosing, I don't think he'd be in the Premier League. So I think James is almost a victim of timing, but I'm almost 100% certain he'll be in the Premier League next year. But I know you felt he deserved a spot this year, didn't you, John?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a big James Wade fanboy. We all know that. I've never hidden my my love of James Wade on this show, and I was really disappointed when the announcement was made. But I understand the reasons and the rankings and, as you mentioned there, Josh, the timing with what's gone on with Rob Cross and blah, blah, blah. And also, it's very easy to talk about James's inclusion fresh off the back of winning a UK Open title. But unfortunately, the UK Open wasn't, or this year's UK Open isn't part of the qualifying criteria for this year's Premier League. It's come a little bit too late for James. But in my opinion, any Premier League without James Wade's appearance is poorer as a tournament for it. I think he's one of the best entertainers that we've got on the darting stage from a patriotic point of view as well. He's an Englishman who I will always cheer on the English lads in the darts. Whether that's Cross or Wade, I'll always back the English guy and look forward to them play. But James, we touched on it earlier. James is sometimes forgotten about as one of the best players we've ever seen on stage, and despite the fact that he's won so much and got so many majors in the locker and has been around for 3 decades, he's sometimes a victim of his own success, James. But I can see arguments on both sides for it. I do feel for James. I feel for the viewing public, because I think he always adds an extra layer to the Premier League. It is what it is. I'm sure James is big enough and bold enough to swallow it this year. But as you say, Josh, if he if he carries on in the form that he's shown so far, particularly in the UK Open, I'm sure he'll be back next year, and we can all look forward to a Premier League with James Wade in it. Neil, your thoughts? Has James Wade been unlucky?
Yeah, I think he has, but I look at it from a slightly different perspective. So the final pick was Johnny Clayton.
Yeah,
and I think based on form, he's thoroughly deserving of his place.
Absolutely.
My fear for him is that, and I think John said it earlier, that he may have peaked too soon in terms of his form. But let's see how that goes. So no problem with Johnny Clayton being picked, and I think that his selection has been more than justified. Now, in terms of James, he was one of the two players that you potentially would have talked about at the time of potentially having a chance if it wasn't Johnny, and I think the other player was Dave Chisnell. So James was probably always in the frame, and he's now backed that up further with his win at the UK Open. So from that perspective, he is. I think if they were picking the 10 most informed players in darts, he would be in it, and some of those wouldn't be. So yeah, unfortunate, but if he carries on the form, then as Josh said, he's already overtaken Rob Cross. He'll probably make next year's Premier League.
Okay, gents, thank you very much.
Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry, Josh's Dartistry.
This is Dan Dawson, and you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Right then, guys, we are nearly at the end of this episode of The Bounce Out. But before we go, let's dip into the mailbag, see what the people are saying. This is Josh's Twitter chatter. Okie dokie, Josh, let's dive straight in. I'm just looking at Twitter. Friend of the show, Woody Rudd. Thanks for getting in touch, Woody. You're always good with the questions for the Q&A section. Woody says, hi lads, great show as always last time. Thank you very much, Woody. Do you know what Corey Cadby is up to these days? Haven't heard anything for a while. Also, on the subject of Australian darts, do you think there might be bigger tournaments one day in Australia, or is it too far from the main tour? Taking into account costs for lower ranked players might be an issue, ? Josh, let's hand it over to you, our man in the darting world. Have you heard anything from Corey Cadby? What is the latest?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, because of COVID. I remember he did an interview just before we had the first lockdown in March 2020, because there's been well-documented issues with Corey, and he pulled out of a few events and he relinquished his tour card. He was planning the comeback. I think he got his head sorted out. He admitted he'd let people down, his management down, but he was ready to come back. But obviously, because of the coronavirus situation and the travelling situation, I think that's kind of put those plans on hold. He didn't enter qualifying school this year, that's for sure. Whether he's still very young in darting terms, so Corey Cadby, so he's got plenty of time on his side. I'm not sure if he's still playing competitive events in Australia. I know he played a lot of online events last year during the first lockdown, but in terms of competitive stuff, I'm not too sure on Corey, but I hope we can see him at Q School, if not next year, very soon afterwards. He's a fantastic talent, a really interesting character, and I'm sure we'd all like to see Corey back competing in the PDC. That's the first question that Woody has asked. And in terms of the second bit, I do remember them holding, I think, a decade or so back now, some Players' Championship events in Australia. We've got the World Series, of course. I think the logistical issues of hosting many events in Australia is a major issue, particularly in COVID times. I know we're hoping we get to some sort of normality now in the summer, but that's not necessarily going to be the same for everyone around the world. And the thought of trying to get 128 players from the Pro Tour over to Australia for tournaments, it seemed very tough logistically. So I think the World Series are a very positive thing for Australian darts. It gives the local players a chance to compete against the PDC's elite. In the future, I'm sure that's a market they're really looking to exploit. And we've got the likes of Simon Whitlock. Damon Hetter's having a fantastic time of it from Australia now. We had Carl Anderson, who has now given up his tour card due to the restraints with travelling and everything. So who knows on that score? But I think Australia's definitely a market they're going to look into. But whether that's in terms of Pro Tours, it's going to be very difficult. Maybe a major tournament would be better. But again, it's just logistically, I think it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, Josh, as you say, it's difficult enough to get, the BDO can't even get 20 players to turn up in Torremolinos, never mind take over 120 people over to Australia. But just going back to Corey Cadby, Neil, it is a shame, isn't it, with Cadby? I remember us speaking on the show, a good 18 months ago about Corey Cadby and what a great talent he was. He's such a young man still, but he has already made an impact on the darting scene. And it's a shame, Neil, that at the moment it seems we won't be seeing Corey appearing on the Oki.
Yeah, I think if we go back a couple of years, I think people were really, really expecting some big things from him, and due to circumstances, it's not quite turned out like that. But I think he's another one with a raw talent and he's still very, very young, that he could easily get back involved and start to do things on the big scene again. I think, was it the UK Open, Josh, where he burst onto the scene and he went quite deep into the tournament?
It was his first ranking major. Second. Sorry, he got to the final. He lost to Gary Anderson. Got to the final.
That's right. So I think we were expecting bigger things since then. Hasn't happened, but he's still a young man, and I'm sure he'll be back. And he has the potential to go to the very top of the game.
Let's move on. Just looking at the Facebook page as well, Josh. We've had a message from Gary Baker. He asked, do you agree with Peter Wright's assessment that Michael van Gerwen won't win a TV title all year? Now, we've already had a discussion about that. So let me flip it on its head. Will Peter Wright win a TV title for the rest of the year, Josh, in your opinion?
I think he will, yeah. Peter Wright, he won the European Championship last year, the Masters, he won the Worlds, of course, on New Year's Day. He's a number 2 in the world. He's a fantastic player. I think the concern with Peter Wright is the chopping and changing of his equipment. I know he says it's worked for him in the past and he's going to continue to do it. It keeps him sharp and focused. But it's so difficult to be able to gauge and find that consistency when you're changing your equipment each week. It's not even little subtle changes like a change of flight or stem. He's changing his darts, the weight of darts completely. So I think he needs to settle now on one set of darts. You look at James Wade, who we just discussed. I don't think James Wade has changed his darts in 20 years. Michael van Gerwen, before joining Windmill, I think he had the same darts for about 10 years, Michael, and it didn't do him any harm. So I think Peter Wright has got to stick to a consistent setup if he really wants to challenge Gerwin Price and Michael for the world number 1 spot. But yes, I think he's too good not to win a major this year.
Neil, it would be the ultimate irony, wouldn't it, if come the end of the year, MVG was stood on stage with a number of titles to his name and Peter had none. That would be the ultimate irony, wouldn't it?
It would be, and that's, as I said earlier, I think that's always the danger when you say things like that. I fully expect them both to win some big titles this year, so let's see.
Josh, we've also had another question come in on the Facebook page from Mickey Gensler. Shout out to you, Mickey. Thanks for getting in touch. Mickey asked, do you think Price will remain world number 1 all year? And off the back of that, Josh, he's also asking, what are the most times the world number 1 spot has changed hands in a single year? Josh, you're going to be best placed to answer that.
In terms of the first part of the question, I do think Price will remain world number 1, certainly until the World Championship. If you look at the Order of Merit now, he's got almost a £300,000 lead at the top of the Order of Merit. He's accumulated over £1,300,000 in terms of prize money, and his nearest challengers are Peter Wright and Michael van Gerwen, who are just over the £1 million mark. So almost £300,000 in prize money. That would need Gerwin to have a couple of really early exits in majors, and Michael and Peter to win a couple of big ones that they didn't a couple of years ago. I think Gerwin's got the Grand Slam of Darts title to retain or to defend in terms of money later on in the year. But besides that, not too much. Whereas Michael won a number of titles in 2019 that he's got to defend. So, yeah, I think Gerwin Price will certainly be world number 1 going into the World Championship, but then £500,000 for the winner. If Peter or Michael win the World Championship, in all likelihood, they will then overtake Gerwin to become world number 1. But certainly until December, in terms of Ali Pali, I think Gerwin Price will go into the tournament defending his world title as world number 1.
Neil, is that a sentiment you agree with? 12 months of world number 1 for Gerwin Price?
Yeah, I think so. I think the belief he must have after the World Championships is only going to send him on to more big tournament victories. So, yeah, I don't see why not.
Josh, going back to the second part of Mickey's question there, what's the most times in a single year that the world number one spot has changed hands? I'm going to go out on a limb here, Josh, and say that's quite difficult to know either off the top of your head or do some research for you.
Yeah, I'll have to get me abacus out for you, Mickey, but I'm having a look now. We've had 11 PDC world number one, so it's changed hands on a few occasions. I think we had Alan Warren a Little was world number one for about 6 months, and then Phil Taylor overtook him in 2002. We saw John Part world number one for a few months before Phil Taylor then regained that in 2003. Colin Lloyd for about a year, Barney for a year. So a couple of times per year we've seen it change hands, but I don't think we've had more than 2 world number ones in 1 year, if that makes sense, in the PDC. But there is a first time for everything, of course.
Neil, in this day and age, how significant is the title world number one? We've seen in the last 24 months a number of different players sharing some of the major titles around. It's not been dominated by Michael Van Gerwen like it has in the past. They've not been dominated by Phil Taylor like they have in the past. A lot of these tournaments have been shared out by some of the recognised names, but also some people who are less established and are coming through and winning their first titles at a young age and an early stage in their career. How important is the moniker world number one now?
I think it's very important because to be known as the best player on the planet at any given time with such a high calibre set of players that we now have in the PDC is a huge thing. And whilst you could look at is the best player in the world the one that wins the World Championship as the biggest tournament, that's at a point of time. Whereas I think the rankings itself is more about the darting calendar and the last 2 years of the darting calendar. So correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. Yes, winning the World Championship is a fantastic achievement, but being world number one shows that you have performed at a consistently at the top level for that 2 year period.
Absolutely. I mean, the World Championship is the pinnacle. To become world champion, everyone asks you, in any individual sport, are you a world champion? So that's, of course, a massive thing. But you can become world champion and not necessarily be the best player in the world, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Like you say, if you are the world number one, there is nobody better than you. So that is a huge. And I remember Colin Lloyd speaking about it before.
Yeah.
What an honour it was for him to. He never won the world title, but he did win 2 majors, the Grand Prix and the World Match Play. But his pride at overtaking Phil Taylor and becoming world number one was massive.
Yeah. However, if you're offered the chance to be either world number one or world champion, you're going to take world champion.
Of course, because yes, you become world number one. That's fantastic. But you haven't got that world title to show for it. So, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thanks, gents. Josh, I believe you've got one more question there for us.
We have one more from Paul from Brighton. He has said, every year now there is a bottleneck at Q School. Hundreds of players piling in. Are too many good players missing out because 128 tour cards aren't enough? Is the Challenge Tour big enough to nurture the level below the main tour? It's a good question, Paul. Q School, a lot of people described it as a lottery in the past, and I think to some extent it could be considered that because you only need one good day to win a tour card and get your 2 year place on the tour. I think the fact that they introduced a different system this year, the PDC, there was a first stage you had to get through to the final stage. And I think that was a major positive in terms of trying to eradicate those, with all due respect, who aren't good enough to be competing in Q School. So I think the cream had to rise to the top this year to get through Q School. In terms of, I think 128 tour cards are enough. I don't think you'd want more than that, to be honest. There is a fantastic strength in depth. Yes, you could go to 140 odd, 160 maybe, but I think 128 tour cards are enough. And the Challenge Tour is a major thing in terms of nurturing the level below. Rob Cross, for example, topped the Challenge Tour Order of Merit. That's how he got his tour card. He didn't go to Q School. The PDC give the top 2 on the Challenge Tour spots on the PDC Tour, and Rob Cross topped the Challenge Tour. A year later was crowned world champion. So you can't get a better advertisement for the Challenge Tour than that, really.
Yeah, I think I would subscribe to your view, Josh. I think 128 cards is probably the right amount. If you're going to go down the route of handing more out, everything we talk about there being a bottleneck at Q School, all of a sudden there becomes a bottleneck on the tour, doesn't there? And everyone's sort of competing for the prize money, if you like. Not only are the good players not getting a tour card in this instance, we've got good players who are not going to be earning any money because there are that many more players playing on the tour. So it swings and roundabouts, I suspect. I expect, depending on which side of it you come down on. Neil, Q School, obviously Josh mentioned in there, slightly different format. Originally, as Josh said, you could have one good day and find yourself in possession, but this time round you had to do a little bit more this time. Neil, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult with all these things, and they're always going to be tweaking the rules slightly in terms of the criteria needed to qualify. And eventually, you hope that they get to something that most people agree with and most people are happy with. There was one particular element that I didn't understand in terms of the scoring criteria for Q School, and I think Josh made me aware of this when he was worried that Barney wasn't going to make it. Was that any round one games didn't count towards the legs difference? Is that right?
Yeah, we mentioned that before, and the reason they did that is because that some players got byes in the later stages of Q School, so they didn't want to award someone a point for getting a bye, which is understandable. But they should have counted the legs difference, in my opinion, because you'd be better off losing in the first round than losing in the second round, because your legs difference would then be negative in terms of losing in the second round. Even if you've won 6-0 in the first round, that doesn't count. So the fact that you'll be better off losing in the first round than the second does not make sense to me, and I hope that's something they address next year, because I think that had an impact on who got the final tour card at Euro Q School. I think Roby John Rodriguez might have missed out, or Rusty Jake, for that reason. So it's something they need to assess for sure. Well,
if we go back over PDC previous form, they have tinkered with the rules of various bits and pieces. Obviously, we're talking about, the change of format in Q School this year. You never know. If somebody doesn't get a tour card this year, they might let them play in the Premier League and call them a contender, Josh.
Oh, I thought you'd
Can we not move on from that?
I can't let it go, Josh. I can't let it go.
I'm hoping it'll be introduced next year if the crowds are back. We could get Barney as a contender. That'd be great in Rotterdam.
No. We've tried it. We've done it. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Thank you. Right, Josh, any more questions?
No, that's all for this episode, John.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for your questions as ever. It's always good to hear from you. That was Josh's Twitter chatter.
And you're listening to Josh's Dartistry.
Right then, boys, that brings us to the end of the show. Slightly reduced show, but that's what our bounce out format is for, just to get around the table and very quickly discuss and bring to you all the very latest news. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully that's been informative, and we look forward to getting around the table for a full show. I hate it when we get on Zoom and have a chat, lads, and especially with you, Neil, we don't get the chance to grill Josh and do a challenge, Josh. But Neil, I'm sure we'll be bringing that back for the next full episode, won't we?
We will be. I'm looking forward to it. I can't remember. Didn't he have a... We caught him on the last one, didn't we? I think
I got 13 last. I got 2 wrong last time. 13.
And he atoned for leaving me out of his Hoddy 11.
I thought we'd let that go as well. Dear me.
I never forget. I'm like an elephant in more ways than one. Right, and on that bombshell, Neil Connor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Josh, thank you for your time.
Thank you, John.
And we'll see you all next time for the Josh's Dartistry podcast.
Josh's Dartistry.